welcome to Layback with Betfair. Joined by the A-team, we're back.
Hello, welcome to Layback with Betfair Education Series, Episode 2. I'm Tom Haylock, joined by the special guest, Dave Pfundt. I hope I got that right, Dave, as I welcome you in, of FormKing fame, I must say. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. I've spoken to you a fair bit over the last year or two. I'm a FormKing user. Love what you're doing. You've built a solid reputation on social media. If you're worm of the week, your FormKing database is going superbly. I'm very keen to dissect and chat with you over the next half an hour or so about things you're doing, things coming up, the great game itself. So I'll just start. We'll do a bit of an intro. We'll do a 10-minute segment on FormKing itself. We might talk about data analytics and versus general video form, and data versus the eye is something we could talk about all day. So how are you, mate? You well?
I'm good. It was an early start, 4:30 a.m., but I'm here.
Flown over from Tassie?
From Tassie, took the raft, yep.
You grew up on a farm, I
believe.
I did,
yeah. A couple of 100 acres in Tassie near Beaconsfield where the miners got stuck down there.
How does a guy that grew up there end up in software engineering and data analytics?
Yeah, it's been a journey, and in Tassie as well. I did my degree at utilise.
Yes, what was the degree?
Bachelor of Computing.
Yep.
And I was lucky enough to get a job straight out of uni just with a small consulting company in Launceston, and was there for a few months, enjoyed it, but saw this ad come along for a bigger company. I didn't know who it was at the time, and I applied for that. It turned out it was Telstra, and they had like a satellite group in Launceston that were doing all sorts of software engineering sort of stuff, electrical engineers as well, and got the job. Talked my way into it.
Nice. I love these education series, but Layback in general, because I get to talk about people that are generally smarter than me. So I'm excited to hear about your background. You didn't always follow horse racing. You weren't born into it per se. How did you get into the game?
Not really. My uncle did train some slow ones in Tassie.
Right.
Pinterry Boy was his best horse. But look, as a kid, I probably had a recreational interest in it. Growing up, I knew who the Melbourne Cup winners were, followed Northerly, Sunline, those sorts of things. But it wasn't really until 2015 when it was Cox Plate Day.
Yes. Who won the 2015 Cox Plate?
Winks' first Cox Plate.
Oh, yes. Yep. That was a silly question of me.
Yeah. Down the east coast of Tassie, and we were just down at a shack there, and one of the guys said, "Do you want to go to the pub and place a few bets?" And they had to drag me there. I basically said, "No, not really.
Not for me.
Not for
Don't
me.
like horse racing much.
Not for me. It's not that I didn't like it. I just couldn't really be bothered." And
yeah.
So we go down there and put on a few sort of exotics on the day, and we literally got most of them up, including the Cox Plate. So I think we had Winks, Highland Reel, and Criterion in the trifecta, and got that a number of times. And that was just, I don't know what it was, but that was it for me. How good's this? We probably only won a few $100 or,
yep.
But then that just started the cogs going in my head.
What started, like, what cogs were going? What were you thinking at the time? Do you remember? Was it more about the data analytics side of it, or just how good the game is? Or
well, probably not in the first few weeks. I
Yep.
probably got a sports bet account not long after I
Yep.
did that, and my Betfair account followed closely afterwards. And so it was mainly about yes, absolutely. Well, it's true. And a couple of months later, all the optimism sort of starts to go, and you go, okay, you actually have to work at this. And that's when I started going, okay, well, what sort of data's out there? As a kid, I would play entire, fantasy seasons of AFL football and note down the stats. And following cricket, I would know the averages of all the Australian bowlers.
Yes.
Yep. And so that was probably a natural progression for me.
It's great that you could use your skill set and implement that into a hobby and something you like. And I think a lot of data people love doing that, whether it be sport, whether it be racing, and combining a passion versus a knowledge base and ending up with FormKing. So looking forward to dissecting that a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said you followed Betfair or discovered Betfair shortly after that. Do you know when you set up your account?
Yeah, it would have been early 2016
Yep.
when I was sort of starting to have a regular bet on the weekends. And I mean, the thing I loved about it immediately was you could get information via API. and that was something that I couldn't get anywhere else. So
yes,
I could find out what the prices were. I could find out what the fields were, and that was a huge turning point for me.
So before FormKing, well, you mentioned you started doing the data or learning about the data in racing. Where were your sources? Where did you get all that from? Was it hard to find? What was that journey like?
It was very hard to find. So this is 2016, and even scraping websites were of much lesser quality back then, and they didn't use APIs. You had to go looking for it. I remember furiously Googling for horse racing data. It's got to be out there somewhere. Someone's got to have it.
Yeah.
And so look, over a period of time, I found sources of data. I had scrapers, I had those sorts of things, and it was all just for my learning activities. And eventually that, when FormKing started to turn around into a product, that became a thing where I commercially purchased data.
Was that, like, how long did it take to start thinking about actually doing FormKing or setting up your own database for Form? Was it a couple of years after? Was it 2 years ago? Yeah,
I'd say by the end of 2016, I had my original goal was framing markets from data.
Yes.
And automating that. And I was going to look at automated betting through Betfair as well. But then, so after sort of 12 months of doing that, I had enough tools that I was starting to see that I had the bones of a product. And then from 2017 onwards, I was starting to refine those and collate them into an app.
Yep.
And sort of grew from there.
What data were you sourcing back then? And how's that journey look? What compared to what you're sourcing now? Was it sectional data back then? Was it just track data, barrier stats? What kind of stuff were you looking into initially? Or
yeah, crazily enough, I didn't touch sectional data until 2020.
Yep.
And so for those first 4 years, I was really dealing with historical public form guide information, but cut in a lot of different ways and using things like regression and other techniques to try and find the optimum weightings for that information. And I think I've said previously, even to this day, there is really good information there, and that means something in a race. But it really was taken over by sectional data and times and weight rating information that came later on.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about data versus form. Were you doing any video replays, or was it purely data? Were you doing any manual form?
A lot of it,
yep.
Yeah. So I was probably watching a lot more replays than I would now.
Yep.
Now I'll probably just watch the key moments of form races.
Yep.
Back then I'd watch anything I get my hands on. But yeah, now it's really just the data leads me to my initial position, and then I want to try and sort of find my own angle after that.
Yeah. So how much you mentioned now you just watch the key bits of races or key races. So you're using data primarily to educate you or guide you, I guess, into what you need to look at from a video perspective. And then what are you looking for from a video perspective, like excuses, horses travelling wide, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and clear running and things like that. Yep. So, we've all seen the ran on beautifully late scenario and just back me next start. And I think the key thing combining data there is, like, was that horse that was coming home actually accelerating, or were the leaders regressing? So that's a really important thing for me. And then pairing it up with your eye, because we get so much information from our eye that we can't quantify in a single number.
Yes.
That can tell us, I just have a feeling that horse had a lot more in the tank.
I love the example of back me next time horses that finish off. And interesting, the sectional data, horses incredibly rarely run their fastest sectional as the last 200 metres of the race. It's usually between the 800 and 600 or 1,000 and 800. So it's an interesting point around the data and the sectional data and how to read that data. And I want to ask you a little bit about why, or I want to talk to you about biases in reading data in a minute, but sectional data is obviously vital. I think I'm a little bit different in the way I do form. I watch a lot of replays and then use the data to back up my eye.
Yep.
What's your weighting around both of those?
I start in the other direction, so I'll start with the data and then I'll use my eye to to select.
Yep.
What
Is there
I like
a right
out
or
of it.
wrong answer in your opinion?
No, absolutely not. And you know what? You can, some people will do no form and turn up on a Saturday and look at horses' condition and behaviour and have a bet. So, look, I start with the data. I like to know. I need to get a feel for how strong is this race as a field first. Who, and then who's who in that race. Who are the likely chances? Is there one chance? Are there 5 winning chances? And that will sort of give you some parameters around what the spread of betting might be like. And critically, I like to turn off the public odds before I do my form.
Yes.
So I don't like to be anchored by what the bookmakers have said that the chances are. I want to try and find that out for myself first. And then when I think I've done enough, I like to get 100% market to say, okay, this is my default opinion. And then
is that in your head, or are you putting that in writing?
No, it's all in FormKing. So I'll just annotate. You can select ratings, base ratings. You can make adjustments to those, and then that'll price for you, or you can take over and intuitively price as well. And then I'll reveal the market and then see where we disagree.
I think one of the great points we touched on it is there's no right or wrong way to go about doing the form. And as you mentioned, there are guys out there that do form from the yard and mounting yard analysis and just look for improvement from horses. There's data-based clients like yourselves. There's even clients that or punters that are next level and don't even know what a horse looks like,
sure.
and trade and simply use the data. And then there's guys that watch a lot of replays, watch trials or whatever. So there's no right or wrong answer, which I love about the game. It's every race is essentially a puzzle, Dave, and we talked about this when we caught up earlier off air. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
It is. It's great. I mean, they call it the great game for a reason, and it's because you can just love the horses and have a bet. You can love the data and have a bet, and I totally understand why people might just follow the data and make their selections that way. And you're not necessarily getting caught up in the emotion of the racing, but then the inverse is true as well.
Let's talk about bias, because everyone can have the same set of data, and data is becoming so more prevalent now than it was back in 2016 when you first discovered Betfair or first started following racing in more detail. Obviously, and you'll attest to this as well, that data is different, and we can get to that as well. But if everyone has the same data, if every punter in Australia has the same data, everyone will read it slightly differently. Everyone will have their own biases towards, they might like a horse more, they might back the horse last start and it won. How do you analyse the data and make sure it's remove bias or use biases to your favour? It's a complex question. You might not have the answer, I don't know. But how do you ascertain or justify that?
I totally agree that if you give the same piece of information to 10 people, you'll get 10 different assessments.
Yeah.
Now, I used to give my prices to friends and other people who like to have a bet, and some people would back the top rater. Some would level stake the top rater. Some would proportional stake it. Some would go, okay, Dave said it's a $5 chance and I can get $8. I'm going to back that one. Everyone behaves differently when they're confronted with data. And I think that's because our brains work differently. Some people love tables of numbers and other people get, more out of an image or a graph.
Yep. So you mentioned a book that talks about bias. I was fascinated by this off air. How are you aware of biases when you're doing the form or reading data? Has it got any tips out there for people that might want to do a race without bias or prejudice or whatever it might be?
For sure. Look, that book was Thinking Fast and Slow by Dan Kahneman and Avis Tversky, I think it is. They sort of touched on all the things that we're all, susceptible to, and we are all susceptible to biases. And so I think the number one piece of advice is understand that you're going to be biased, and then if you're gonna have a bet, go into it knowing that, and then try and eliminate some of the worst biases. So like in racing, anchor bias is a big one. And so try and make your opinion before you see what others' opinions are.
Yep.
And that might be reading media articles, it might be looking at the public odds. Try and have some opinion, whether it's right or wrong, or something that you can then look at and then say, okay, well, the market says $2, I'm saying $5, and then you set about a process to go, could they be right, or is it likely that I'm right?
Yeah. So you said you try not to look at public markets first. I'm similar. I'd much rather do the form without looking at the public market to see where I sit and use that as a guide to highlight errors that might have been in my form process. I might have missed something if I've marked something $10 and it's actually $3. You believe in that strongly?
I do, yeah. Yep. Another bias I think is really prevalent in racing is recency bias, and so something that happened recently gets weighted very, very heavily by the market, and so things like peak form, recent peak form, you just know. And here's one for the data people: like if a time is really good in a recent meeting and then that horse lines up again, the market just zones in on those really fast times, and sometimes to their peril. I think it's knowing about that, the way that the market likes to price, and certainly the early markets will do that.
Yes. And
the late markets will correct that quite often.
Yeah.
And if you're aware of that, you can go, okay, well, yeah, that rating number says it's really, really high, but I've got a note here that says that there was a tailwind on that day and they all ran fast time.
Yeah, right. And we'll talk about that, I think, with Amelia's jaw potentially coming up later in the show. How do you read Betfair markets? You mentioned it a little bit with ratings. Before I ask you that, I actually want to ask you with peak ratings. So you say that the markets tend to hone in on last start performance.
Yep.
Kind of a question without notice, but do you, if a horse runs a strong PB, is it often that they regress from that last start or next start? Sorry, is there a weighting that do you think it can continually improve? Do you think it can hit that rating again? It might be a horse by horse, case by case scenario, but if a market is rating a horse of its last start, and if the last start was a PB, how do you go about assessing that form?
Yeah, I think it is a case by case basis because some horses are progressive, and you have to know or have an idea that a horse might still be improving. And like a great one for me was Giga Kick in the Everest. Beware the unbeaten horse. I had him pegged at a good stakes level 3-year-old, 100 on my scale rating, and then he just found the right scenario and the right platform in the Everest. Beautiful opportunity to peak, and he improved 2 to 3 lengths to win that race, and then held that form going forward. And so after 4 starts or whatever it was, I was against it, but I learned a good lesson there, and that's that horses do improve. And so yes, I think be wary of big new peaks. That I think for me though, it's when a whole race goes too well, and that includes the second, third, fourth place getters in the race. If it all feels too high, then you've got to cut it back. And I think that's something that I do and smooth out for FormKing subscribers.
Yep. Another horse that came up in a meeting prior to today was Think About It. Another horse that's similar to Giga Kick in a way that kept improving but may not have hit the right ratings constantly. How do you weigh up a horse like that knows how to win, finds the line, but may not be running great data because it's only beating horses that it has to by a short margin or something? Is that where data can potentially lie, or it might be a case to be against data potentially?
I mean, there's always cases to be with and against data in the right scenario, but think about it. It's progression, and you can see it in the rating profile. It sort of went up gradually, and it was placed to perfection by Joe Pride. And he even said in a pre-race interview, the data teams just have never caught this horse. And he was spot on, because I never backed it.
And kept going around at a decent price and kept winning.
Yeah, and it was going around at between $2 and $5, I suppose, and getting stepped up all the time, of course. And I think that's where your racing brain has to take over, and you go, right. Yeah. And the other thing about that horse was it could settle just off the pace, in a really nice spot. And its Everest win was exactly that it just got the perfect run and put itself in the race, and there's a lot to be said for that.
I backed second and third in that Everest, and they were probably better runs.
I backed second. It was I was showing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even remember who ran third, but they were better runs than there's just a running race in that specific scenario. But he just does enough.
Yeah.
About it.
You don't get paid on better runs, sadly.
No, that's very true. What's the future of horse racing and data? Obviously, it's come a long way, and we see that. And we had a debate with quite a few people at a Betfair function in Melbourne and Sydney, and we debated data versus the eye. Is there a world where data is overplayed now in markets versus the eye, and maybe there's an edge going back to just doing the replays and almost backing yourself and your judgment?
I think that can be
true. You might
true.
not want to say that because you're obviously got
pushing
a data
product. So, no, but I think that can be true for sure. And I'm aware. I'm looking out for that scenario. A, when I rate a race or rate a meeting, and B, when an upcoming race happens, I'm looking at those numbers and going, how's the form come out of that? And how have the market prices come out of those ratings? Do they reflect how I assessed it? And I think, so knowing where the data teams are going to be vulnerable could be an edge for sure.
I know we talked about considering, you watch replays to consider bad luck or luck in running, et cetera, et cetera. You can't weight that on ratings, can you?
I mean, you can weight it. You can attempt to weight it. But the big thing then is if you're going to watch 3 videos and try and correct 3 ratings out of a potential sort of 10 or 12 in the race, you've really got to do it for every horse.
Yeah. To
be consistent.
So the ratings and FormKing ratings, et cetera, take all that out of the equation, and it's basically just raw figures. How do you go about rating a horse at FormKing? And we can touch on that in a minute, but is it time? Is it based on margin to the runner, the winner potentially, whatever it might be, the horses? Is it track speed? Is it, I said times, but weights? Is it all of it?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think. And it's quite a process. Like I'm supported by a huge framework of formulas and research that I've done into weight theory, into track speeds, and for example, every track in Australia, I have a specific formula for every 200 metre split that I have clocked for track speed, telling me the distance between the track grades in that split.
Yep.
And that includes the overall time and things like that. So I'm supported by that framework when I need to produce a rating. And my ratings are mainly 2 components, pre and post race. So pre-race, the computer makes a guess at how strong this field is. And then it looks up the time that I would expect a race of that strength to run. And we don't know how fast the track's playing at this stage. It's just pre-race. Yep. And then post-race, once you have verified times available, and sectionals, critically, then a series of formulas kick in to say, okay, well, how fast did they run? How fast did they travel early in the race? Because that affects the overall time massively. Yep. What adjustments do I need to make there? And then where does that compare against the pre-race guess? And then from there, I can sort of generate a rating. And that gets done consistently. And my job really is just to smooth for any anomalies like, say, rain during a meeting, heavily biased meetings where they might hit the outside fence and get worse as the day goes on and the track speeds get slower. You might not want to include races early in the card when you're making those calculations. And so that's really the process of arriving at a rating.
How do you go about scenarios we saw where 1,100 metre races at Sandown, per se, when the Caulfield was out of action for a period and there wasn't a big data set? Is that tricky to manage?
It's tough. It's tough because you've only got a couple of historical samples to make your pars.
Yeah.
And so Caulfield Heath was another new track. After the first week, I had no pars. I was able to get a couple because they ran the distance a couple of times on the day, so you might get 2 or 3 races. But of course,
small sample size.
Yeah, small sample size, and so you really need absolute minimum sort of 20 to 30 historical samples for a distance.
Yep.
And odd distances are a pain as well because Geelong's a track that is notorious for moving the barriers like 7 metres or something, and
in the rail
1207, 1217.
Saw a few half rail movements in Queensland recently, which God knows why they do it, but rail movement must be huge in times. You've got odd distances, as you said.
It makes a difference. And so I've got to account for all of those when I'm building these pars, and so that if they suddenly run a 1219 metre race at Geelong, I can then generate a rating in the same manner I would the 1200.
Yep. We saw, I think it was Pakenham as well, when they went to the shoot start, which they only do during daylight savings because they don't have lights down the chute. It might have changed now, but they were running really fast times and threw a lot of data teams out.
Yeah, and so you see stuff on Twitter, has something happened with the Pakenham 1200?
Yeah.
But my bugbear with that one is that the official data feeds don't tell you that it's a shoot race in a data form.
Yep.
And so you've got to do things like I manually have to set it as a shoot race.
So you'll see a massive spike in times and go, what's going on here?
Yeah. And I'm well across that one now. But like you get those.
Yeah.
You get track resurfacing, like the Gold Coast, for example, where, I had all this historical data that's now unusable because the new surface they're running a second or so quicker.
Yep.
You just can't use that. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you do with, like we discussed Canterbury with fencing run bias, and then that flipped for 6 months where fence wasn't the place to be. You see Flemington outside fence, they aerate the outside lanes potentially, whatever it might be. How do you weigh all that up? That must be a nightmare.
Bias is difficult. It's a bit like luck in running.
Yep.
So bias, you need lanes data to be doing bias in an automated way. But I think you should treat that as an extra layer of analysis on top of the ratings. And so base ratings will give you, what did happen, adjusted for the conditions on the day. That's so important.
Yep.
But then, bias is really, what patterns existed, whether it's performance versus expectation, in lane one, did everything that won stick on the fence? Suddenly you've got, there are cases where the anti-data guys can rule next time out.
Yeah, it was a perfect example on Saturday at Caulfield where I actually liked one off some trials, and I got a big opinion of a horse that I was worried about. We had a lot of rain at Caulfield Saturday morning and the track deteriorated, and we were kind of expecting that, but if the rain didn't hit, it was going to be a big chance, in my opinion. The rain fell, fence was off, it drew barrier 2, and it went from being a great bet to basically having no chance, and the price didn't actually change much, which was interesting. So how do you go about doing that if you take your FormKing hat off, just in terms of form and biases and doing the form for stuff like that?
So important. I mean, if you think that a meeting is likely to be biased, I think don't bet early is the first thing you do.
Yep, and we see so many biased tracks
in winter
challenges at the moment, and tracks deteriorating really quickly. We saw it Randwick on the weekend too.
Yeah, and that I had a bet in the highway, and then I put the cue in the rack for the rest of the day because those sort of days, the winners become who handled the conditions better, not who's the best horse.
Yep, this is why I probably get criticised on social media for being negative. But the fact that big data teams and guys like yourself see a race, and generally clients like you are high turnover, low profit margin data automated teams, they see a race like that or a track deteriorate and just pull the pin on a meeting. It has a dramatic impact on turnover, and that affects the whole sport. Roots down, like everything. So that's why I get frustrated.
Yep.
And it gets advertised as like a good 4 on a Thursday, no rain predicted, and we end up on a heavy 9 potentially on Saturday. It's incredibly frustrating for data teams.
It is. And look, first and foremost, I'm not a track curator, so I always stop short of attacking the track curators.
Yeah, it's got nothing on them.
I think the policies are the place you need to start. I think the tracks are, as a whole, overwatered now in Australia.
Yep.
And that's because of more of a political thing more than anything, that, someone has said, dead 4 is the perfect surface, and now they're even saying dead 5 is the perfect surface. The problem with that is for betting is that, on those sort of tracks, you get fast lanes and slow lanes, you get different drainage, and then all it takes is for the jockeys to work out where the fast lane is. Everyone wants to be there. And, any price that you could dream up pre-race can be completely unusable.
Yeah. Is there a case to say that you, if for example Caulfield or Randwick on a recent weekend was wet and you could ascertain the track data and the actual rating of the track surface better than or faster than the average punter, could you use that and look for wet trackers, potentially bet onto wet trackers later in the day based on early ratings?
I mean, that's exactly what I aim to do. Like FormKing can tell you track speeds, and this is race day tooling is something I'm delving in now going forward. But the first couple of races, you really want to know how fast is this track playing. It can often be misleading with tempos and 2-year-olds and things like that. But if you can stamp the bias before everyone else, and maybe look at things later in the card that you think are going to be suited, you can definitely have an edge there.
Yep.
In saying that, though, places like Caulfield can turn around in the last part of the card as well.
Which we saw with recommendation 2 starts ago, not the recent weekend, but fence later in the day looked the place to be, and it changed dramatically.
And those last few races on that day were, if you are a data person, they were very hard to comprehend because recommendation wins by 7 lengths. But the horses that ran behind it, like the time was nothing flash. And so the horses that ran behind it, if you're doing margin analysis, they look like, country horses and their ratings. And so you have to then look at things like, do I compress the margin spread on that day because of, how much worse it was if you had to travel wide. As it was, he came out and won again last week. And, it was fairly confirmed that he ran well.
Yeah.
Just, he definitely didn't run well enough to win an Everest.
Yeah. And the ratings, people, you got to weigh all that up.
You do.
Which is fascinating. Let's get to FormKing, a little project of yours. What is it? How did it start? We kind of answered how it came about, but what is it?
Yeah, so FormKing is it's a cloud-based database and platform. So it's really more than just a database now, and so everything is sort of positioned for me to be able to service business to consumer clients, like B2C clients, with the web apps, with FormKing, and then B2B other businesses via data feeds.
Yep.
Things like broadcast media feeds, things like that on the platform.
Why was there a reason why you built it? Were you just passionate about it? Was it just to provide people with education? Was there any reasoning behind it?
Look, I'm going to say it was a calling. I don't know. I've had moments where I sort of think, early in the early days when I was spending a lot of time on it, building up the tools and not selling anything, really just for personal. It was really just an academic exercise, and I was enjoying the racing more through doing it, for sure, and enjoying my betting more and noticing my betting results get better, as I learned more. But then in around 2020, I started to play with sectional data. I started to deal with track speed, and I started producing stuff, that you'd actually want to use and pay for. And that's when I realized that those data assets, coupled with the technology edge that I have through my previous life, that meant that I really sort of had the grounding of a product.
Yep. How we mentioned data a fair bit, obviously, but where do you get your data from? How do you ascertain the data? How do you know it's accurate? How does it compare to other data sources?
Yeah, so there's a number of different types of data that I use. So, look, official form and fields data I get through Mediality Racing, which are the modern version of AAP. Largely I find that pretty good. That, like with anything of that scale, there are going to be small things like jockey claims and things like that need correction. But I find the way that racing data has gone in the last few years, that they're outweighed massively by things like sectional times, which I purchased from Daily Sectionals.
Yes.
Find fantastic. Vince does a great job, his team clocking all of the Australian tab meetings. And so those verified times I find are really pivotal to my success and my ability to create ratings.
Yes.
I use some weather data, so mainly Willy weather, but I'm also looking into the Norwegians who are gaining some popularity. Yep. They seem to do weather better than we do in Australia. So they've got APIs.
And Mark Lambourne uses.
Yeah, Mark pushes the Norwegians a bit, and for good reason. They do it well.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I don't know much about them. I might get onto it.
And weather is a thing that you have to be on top of. Weather and wind is so important. And do you know, one of my most satisfying moments was when I was starting to do all these track speeds and things like that, and I would line up the track orientation on, say, Google Earth.
Yeah.
And the wind direction on the day.
Is it windy up? Whatever, Willy Wind might be one of the two where you can actually see the angle of the track and
I'd see the times and say it was at Sandown and you've got a roaring southerly for 50 kilometres an hour. Everything down the side runs, no matter how wet the ground is, they run almost fast track times.
Yeah.
And then of course they turn back into the wind and they run heavy track times. And you see that in the data, and that was a turning point for me because I could go, okay, this is having a massive impact on these races.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you've got everything from sectional data, ratings, track speed. What are the key benefits and functionality of FormKing?
So from a data standpoint, I think the cornerstone of it is the performance ratings. And so they're all, it's really just assessing the strength of a race at the weights carried on the day, and then I adjust that to what's called weight for age, and that's like a neutralizer, if you like, that allows me to then convert it back to the weights in any future race. So look, I find if you've seen Worm of the Week, that's my
going to get to Worm of the Week.
Yeah, that's my thing. The ratings I find are the big selling point of FormKing, but I also do sectional benchmarks. So if you've seen Vince Accardi's daily sectional stuff, like he does his own benchmarks,
yes,
you know, just for wind and does all those sorts of things.
Yep.
I do it differently to Vince, and our numbers differ. Our numbers differ from other competitors as well, but you know, that's another angle that you can use other than just having this holistic number. You can look at the breakdown of a race and go, where was the speed in this race? Where was the exertion, as Vince would like to say?
So how do you use the worm? And we're going to get some examples up. Let's talk about that. You wanted to talk about this because it was obviously a winning race for you, the 2023 Toorak Handicap, and I'm keen to dissect this race with you and work through the worm, because we've got a video here and I'll just get it up and we'll get it up on the screen as well. Got the worms. Now, it's almost world famous, your weekly Worm of the Week and how you dissect the worms, but I'm fascinated by this. How do you go about looking at a worm? Now, we had Amelia's Jewel, a short price favourite here, and you can see highlighted there in the white worm. What are you looking at here? What was your standpoint from a worm perspective and the ratings perspective of Amelia's Jewel?
Yeah, so the first thing I noticed with the Toorak last year was that, you know, we had Amelia's Jewel $2.50 favourite,
yes,
coming off that track record at Moonee Valley.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Yeah.
And but what I noticed from a rating standpoint was that she wasn't the dominant rating profile. In fact, she didn't have a peak rating at all that would suggest that she could win the race.
Now, hang on a second. That's an incredible claim, considering she beat Pride Jenny the start prior. She broke the track record, and you're saying she didn't have a rating higher than others in the race.
Yep, spot on. And the key thing there is that the weights that they had to carry in the Group 1 handicap.
Do you think you were alone from a FormKing perspective in that rating? Do you think you rated that differently to other potential data sources? And I say you must have, because it was $2.50 in a Group 1 with high liquidity and a lot of money in the market. So there must have been an opposed view to yourself in this.
I don't think I was alone in rating the Moonee Valley performance, the track record. I think I saw a number of other opinions afterwards that sort of concurred that, yes, it was a really fast time, but the track played really fast and in a genuinely fast range that night. But I think what happened there in the Toorak was that, and there's a lot of anti-weights movements these days as well.
There is a little bit.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in that?
Look, I'm massively pro weights, but I'm actually surprisingly really harsh on weight. Like I don't, you know, the old Don Scott thing, 1.5 kilos length.
Yeah.
That's sort of not relevant these days, but there is a scale for weight affecting time, and I'm on the harsher end of that, you know, so that I'm making sure I'm not overplaying weight, for example.
Yeah.
But look, I just thought that the market was pricing her on something she hadn't done yet.
Yeah, which is, she's always had a boom on her, and maybe that was factored into the price. But you're saying the boom So the ratings probably didn't live up to the hype and the boom of a horse like Amelia's Jewel. We see that. So let's go through these worms. So you've got Amelia's Jewel here, highlighted in white, as you can see. You go through a few others like Antino, got that peak performance higher than Amelia's Jewel there.
Yeah, that was a Queensland weight for age run that he really stamped himself.
Yep. And you go to Attrition. So what are we looking at here with Attrition, who ended up winning, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, so he was a fantastic result here. Look at that rating profile. So if you're looking at the top right of the graph, that's recent and peak or best performances. And he had last start failure, which I love because...
Did you put that down to something? The failure, or do you have to, or do you just forgive it?
Well, I mean, you can try to, but I think you always, the old saying, forgive a good horse one run, I think is very true. And if it was last start, and you can find an excuse.
Yep.
And look, you didn't have to look too far at 30 to 1. I think you even got out to 50 to 1 on Betfair.
Yep. Well played.
To be forgiving, yeah. And you just look at him in a head-to-head sense against Amelia's Jewel. They have an almost identical sort of set of numbers. His second last start was a peak, and then he had a drop off, And so at 50 to 1 in a Group 1 handicap, you got to have something on it. And fortunately, I backed 3 or 4 in the race and came away. I had Anteno as well, and I was cheering for both down the home straight.
What was a better result?
Clearly the roughie, Attrition for sure.
Yeah, well done. So as we go through the video, we've got Pinstripe there as well, which has a good body of work, some steady ratings. What I noticed about Attrition's worm there had steady improvement before that failure as well. So you take that into account, and it almost improved every run in ratings before that failure. So you projected that he could potentially go above his rating of 2 starts ago, and did he?
He went very similarly.
Yeah.
So
that was good enough to win the Tour.
It was, and that was around the likely winning standing of the race. So I think it was 104, 103.9 or something. And that's a very typical Group 1 handicap sort of number. That's obviously at the weights carried. These horses in the Group 1 handicaps get a lot of weight relief. And that's why these weight for age horses, unless they're truly dominant and they beat the handicapper, they can be vulnerable in those races.
Yeah.
And I think it's why we don't see... Sadly, I think it's why we see so many weight for age races these days. But for punters, and if you're really a purist of betting and racing, these Group 1 handicaps and my beloved highway handicaps in Sydney,
you love them.
They're because you have to sit through and work out the chances, and you rely on your ability to line them all up.
Yeah. So as we finish that video, we had Here to Shock, which seems to run a bad race every second start.
It ran poorly on the day, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, which is interesting that it's up and down like a yo-yo. And then Pride of Jenny to finish things off on a complete upward trajectory there.
Well, she had the best rating in the race, last start rating, I think.
Yeah.
So she came out of the same race as Amelia's Jewel, but she was much better treated at the weights. I think did she get 6 kilos off weight for age
something like that, yeah. So you rated her higher based off the weights?
Purely at the weights, yeah. Yep, that's it. I didn't back Jenny. I actually marked her around $11 and she was 14. And so, but, like Attrition, you can look at that worm and say, you can't just price off purely off ratings. You do have to, you can, but you probably, if you're going to put your money down, you want to think about it a little bit more deeply than that. And so I didn't say Attrition was a $4 favourite or anything like that. I had him $11.
Yep.
And I had a number of them $11, and I actually had Antino favourite at around sort of $6, $7. And so I sort of said, this is a $7 field race. And you've got a $2.50 favourite.
Do you ever use the ratings to lay on Betfair? It's obviously a great tool. And
definitely.
Yeah.
So this was a worm of the week post, this one. And I actually put it up as a lay of the week, which was Amelia's Jewel. But I said, depending on your preference, pink or blue button, you might want to back a few instead of, because a lay is obviously backing every horse in the field, and maybe you chance your arm and go for 3 or 4 others.
And that's... and we can talk a bit about ratings and Betfair in a minute, but that's the beauty of the exchange and Betfair. If you have a theory, if you have ratings, if you have prices, whatever you want to do, you can basically execute it on the exchange.
Sure.
Yeah. So I just want to get the ratings table up because it's just a different graphical representation of the worms. So you can see your last start ratings there highlighted in yellow. Sometimes you get a green rating, which is a peak again. So Pride of Jenny, 104.8 rated, race last start, Antino 102, Pinstripe 103, Amelia's Jewel 102.9. So Amelia's Jewel's around the mark there from a last start rating perspective. Obviously beat Pride Jenny, but the weights had a turnaround there, 5 kilos off its last run, carrying 52. So that's just another way to look at the win.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's the same data and it's just presented in tabular form. So prior to Jenny, it was 5 kilos she got off weight for age there, and she had the best last start rating at the weights, but she'd never done anything. So that was a peak. We've seen what she's done since. Now it's easy to look back and go, she's rated higher than that again. But I think people look at data in different ways, as we said before, and some people love the ability to drill down via the table and eyeball straight down a column of numbers. Other people love the ability to look at graphs,
Yep. I just want to finish this race off by just showing that head-to-head graphical representation of Amelia's Jewel versus Attrition there and that image. So as you can see, Attrition, aside from the last start performance, actually rated better 2 starts prior.
He did.
And you're getting a huge price discrepancy there. So that you can highlight this on FormKing, highlight the 2 runners, just do quick comparisons as well, just like that, and see, hang on a second, Amelia's Jewel doesn't rate much better than Attrition throughout its career, but 2 starts ago, clearly rated better.
Yeah, that's it. And look, with the Worm of the Week posts, I can't show the full functionality of the graphs, but really, you can highlight individual runners, you can hold the control button and highlight 3 or 4 runners, give them a head-to-head comparison. And as you do that, the rest of the tables below and all the information is cross-filtering and changing into that context. And so it's really a powerful way to dissect the form.
Let's talk about Still Run. Another race here. I don't know much about this race. Still Run versus Lady in Pink, race 5 at Flemington on the 8th of June recently. What are we looking at here? We'll get the video up on the screen here, Dave. So you're looking at the class, the Worm, Lady in Pink's Worm, obviously progressed its last couple of runs and improved, and then you got Still Run. Yeah,
look, I picked this race because I didn't want to be that guy that just plasters his winners around.
Oh, be that guy. Come on, mate.
And because we all have winners and losers. But look, this was a recent race. It's not a race of any real note, but it's a key one around interpreting the data. And so in this occasion, I actually backed Still Run. Progressive horse, only a couple of starts, but it critically had the 2,000 metre run.
So what you're looking at here with the video is the moving of the distance range below the Worms as well to see. And this is a really interesting point that I probably haven't thought about prior to this show is your ratings. Obviously, something might have a peak rating over 1,200, but it might be running over 1,800, for example. How do you can just use that tool there at the bottom and pick distance ranges. The same with First Up. Early in the prep, I know I spoke to you probably 6 months ago now about identifying when horses were and weren't first up and when their ratings sat in a preparation kind of standpoint.
And you can see that in those tables now with the white borders. And you can go, okay, what did they do last start?
Thanks for adding that in for me.
That's just for you, mate, that one. You weren't the only one that asked for that. And but look, the distance range stuff is really, really powerful, but it also comes with a caveat, and that's that some of these horses, if they're progressive, and I'll use Detonated Jack as an example, who had some really good 3-year-old 2,400 metre ratings and came back the following prep and won over 1,400 First Up. And held its rating from the prior preps. And so there are cases where horses can just buck that trend of, maybe he's not a 2,400 metre horse, and so filtering by distance might cause you to miss something that you'd otherwise see. But, if you're looking at 1,000 metre races, you don't want to be looking at 1,400 metre races. And so I think horses for courses, another one there. And in this race, I fell sort of foul of that. I looked at only really at the 2,000 metre form, and I didn't really look at Lady in Pink, who was the clear best sort of rating profile, but it was all over a mile. And I didn't sort of factor in she was the fit horse off 14 days. He was coming off 30 odd days. And as it was, she got up and won, and he ran well from the back and came out and won since really well. But that on the day, I interpreted the data probably in hindsight, not to my advantage.
Yep, and the other great tool on FormKing as well is track rating. So you can actually filter the worm and filter the ratings per track rating as well.
Both the official condition and track speed, and so you can have a look at because they are, they're not the same thing. You might have a really dry month, and then you just get this deluge of rain at Scone or something, and the track just chops up and looks awful, but they run times of a 4 or a 5, and it's officially an 8, and track speed isn't trying to be going. It's trying to set parameters for the times.
Yep.
And so you can use either of those. I find the official condition often can help with those scenarios. So if it was officially an 8 and it's chopped up really badly, wet trackers are probably more suited because it was a shifty surface,
Yep.
But there are other scenarios where the track was playing like a 1 or a 2, like the Amelia's Jewel night at Moonee Valley. And, if you're using all good track times, you could be 10, 12, 15 lengths out.
Yep. I want to bring up the screenshot as well. So heavy winds, not even sure which track this is at. It's one
Sandown.
I noticed this the other day. I think I was doing the form for a 1,000-metre race, and the 1,000-metre race's track time, obviously given the wind direction, was a lot faster because of the wind.
Yeah.
Is there ever a factor here as well? And I know wind's definitely the main consideration, but the track actually might be better round the back.
Sure.
In the chute, for example, which you see at times with Rose Hill, and the wind blows a little bit, but track often rates faster in the chute, and it might be the wind. But this is obviously a strong wind, and as you can see here, the 2,000-metre races clearly have a faster track rating.
Yeah, and so you're right. The chutes can drain differently to the course proper, and I think the straight. Like often the straight can be really bad, or if the straight's fast, you might get a leader advantage because they get to it and then they're really hard to run down. But I think in this case, and the reason I wanted to show this is because the official condition is flawed in the way that they really only can give one number to the meeting, or to the race. They do change throughout the meeting. In this scenario, you've got this sort of polarizing wind where north south at Sandown, the chutes they're never running into the wind, so they've got 50 k's an hour plus of wind behind them on an affected surface of sort, but they're still running 3.5. That's the start of the dead 4 range. So they're obviously assisted. You couldn't use a time from a soft track there. You'd be backing them in an Everest. So and then on the other side of the coin, you've got this set of circle races that have to run into the wind for a long period, and so that's something that I do in FormKing, and I think I do pretty well, is smooth those conditions out for people.
Yeah. So do you go and adjust those ratings, or just add the comment there, or? So
fortunately, I don't need to adjust the ratings. I just have my job when reviewing is to set the track speeds fairly.
Yep.
And I don't hone in on any individual horse or race when I do that. I'm really just looking at a table of numbers and going, what's the least amount of error across all of these performances, and that's where the track speed gets set.
Yep. So, and this plays to the point about form versus data, or I versus data. In instances like that, data saying that the track was a good 3.5 from the 1,000 metres, obviously wind's a factor, but you might actually see that the track speed was 3.5, but you're getting wet trackers win because it's still actually quite wet.
Totally. And that's why there are 2 different data points going in track speed. And you just, look, as an analyst, you just have to understand that there are days where they can run fast time on a shifty track. Fascinating
subject. How do people, obviously I'm a user of FormKing, I love it, I love speaking to you and learning. How do people get in touch with you or reach out if they want to learn more about FormKing, mate?
Yeah, so my website, www.formking.com.au, would be the first place to go. At the moment, I'm sort of transitioning out of my public beta phase, and so I'm taking all expressions of interest now.
You've got a few, don't you?
We've got a few clients now. We've had a lot of support. Good. Yeah, honestly, I can't speak highly enough of the people that have supported me in the last 12 months. The feedback and everything they've given to me to help me succeed, and that includes suppliers like Mediality and Vince Cardi. And going forward, look, at some point it'll be completely publicly open in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and I'll be looking at other sort of spin-off products as well. I've had a lot of interest, particularly since Racing and Sports has closed down their ratings, for people who really want to bet on the weekends and maybe can't sustain the pro subscription.
Yeah.
So something like FormKing Lite is in the pipeline as well.
Great. Hopefully you can work with Betfair a little bit on
Absolutely.
a few things, which is exciting. Just on Betfair, how's Betfair assisted you in your wagering journey, I guess, and FormKing's journey?
Look, I mean, hands down, Betfair is the most important wagering product in Australia for shaping markets and understanding markets. There was a point in time early on where I didn't have a good understanding of market percentages. I didn't have a good handle on how and why markets move late, and Betfair, everyone follows Betfair. You notice it when there's a scheduled service update, and the corporates suddenly don't know what to do late, and everyone panics. But Betfair moves the Australian market, and so for me, it's the only thing that I have open late, before a race.
Why, you kind of answered it, but Betfair versus other WSPs, or why you use Betfair over other wagering service providers?
Yeah, well, Betfair is truly on your side. The odds are, the margins in the Betfair markets are so much less. You might be betting into, if you're betting early these days, you're betting into 130%. Sure, there's not a lot of liquid on the exchange at that time, but if you're betting late, you're still betting into 118, 120%. And the SP's around that mark as well. Betfair, you're getting 100% plus your commission. You won't get a fairer go.
Yeah. You mentioned, and we talked about this earlier, Betfair's in a great position that we can sit down and have these conversations with data teams and try and educate. You feel like that piece of the puzzle is important?
Massively. I think, as we said before, that the data angle is Betfair's best friend and FormKing's best friend. We both want people to succeed. We want to modernise the game. We want people to speak about horse racing the way they speak about F1, and the amount of data in that sport. And the way that fans lap it up is something that racing should take strong note of, I think, and push to the fore.
We'll wrap up now. Just final piece of advice, anyone that's interested in data, or any advice for punters, how you go about starting to dabble in data, educate yourself, or any advice out there for people wanting to get into the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because I think if you are that way inclined, and it's okay if you're not, if you are interested in scripting or data processing analysis, and there's not a lot of support out for you in racing, I think learn to code. Have a look at languages like Python that allow you to do really sort of small amounts of code to do really powerful stuff. Go to Betfair, go to the developer hub. You can get a delayed API key for free in 5 minutes, and you can call the Betfair APIs. You can get your own transactions out. You can import them and sync them into FormKing if you want, but you can process them in Excel or do whatever you want. That way, have a look at the form sites that are out there. See what sort of data you can get your hands on. Go and talk to Mediality. See what they can do for you. I think get the data is the first thing.
Yes.
And I'm certainly pushing longer term for the industry to look at what they can do for people starting out.
And don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call Betfair customer service, or reach out to anyone from Betfair if you can, and start asking questions, and they can point you in the right direction, because the beauty of Betfair is we are in a position to educate and willing to work and willing to answer questions. So we want everyone to be sustainable in their wagering journey. So
awesome.
It's fantastic. And you've been through that in your early stages developing. So don't ask, you won't find out. So ask as many questions as possible. Dave, been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much. I could talk to you all day about the great game itself, but we continue to learn. We continue to educate ourselves, and FormKing's doing an amazing job with all of that. So congratulations on everything you've achieved to date. Can't wait to see how it progresses in the next few years.
Thanks, Tom.
That has been Laid Back with Betfair Education Series Part 2.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.